Welcome to the Wicked Podcast, where we read the business books you don't have the time for. I'm Marcus Kirsch.
And I'm Troy Norcross.
And we are your co-hosts for the Wicked Podcast.
So, not all of our guests know, Marcus, that in the background, we have WhatsApp going between us to make sure that we kind of know who's going to talk and who's not going to talk and who's going to ask the next question and who's not going to ask the next question. And today, what did you tell me? In the WhatsApp, you're telling me to be nice.
I told you to be nice.
Why are you telling me to be nice? I'm very nice. I'm a very nice guy. I assure you I'm a nice guy.
You are very nice. I'm the rambler and you're the nice guy. But you gave. It was good. I like challenging questions. I think we went in a really good path today, and I was quite happy about it. It was a lot of energy in the room, so to speak. It was good.
Well, it's 7:00 in the morning for us. It was 7:00 in the night for him. He was ready for a beer. We were all ready to go. But wait a minute, we haven't told anybody who's on the show.
Yeah, so today we're having Nick Leach and his book Leading on Purpose, about the importance of purpose in an organization, especially around leadership.
Yeah, and I came in fairly strong as a classic certified boomer, saying this is just millennial fluff, and we need to kind of figure out whether purpose and profit are mutually exclusive or not. So one of my big takeaways is going to be the fact that he's absolutely right. When it's done well and done authentically, profit and purpose are not mutually exclusive, but it's not an easy journey and it's not been very common. The other big takeaway, and I keep coming back to this, especially with the last 5 years and the way society's been changing, emotion is indeed the thing. And he says logic leads to conclusions, emotion leads to actions. And I think that's a really great thing for organizations and teams and leaders to always keep in mind. But those are my two takeaways. What did you take away from today?
Yeah, I think that line was really good. What I took away is, because I have a thing of, and I come across this a lot of companies who, when they want to change, when they want to improve, when they want to be either more purpose driven or more customer centric, which also can be part of the purpose, or one way to describe it in at times, is the governance behind it, right? And I think a lot of what you talked about needs a shift in a lot of leadership styles that are more classic. So my takeaway is that teams will challenge you, right? And that's a thing that should happen, because once the purpose is agreed and spread across the organization, in theory, and I think we just had some of that also in the podcast we recorded just yesterday, is that if people go after the purpose, they will find different ways, and they will sometimes disagree, and they will do it differently, because you just set them on a path. How they get there is often up to them, but you need to let them, right? But if you let them do their stuff, it also means that they're going to challenge you as a leader. So teams will challenge you, and I think it's really important, and it's really important to put that in whatever governance you want to implement, because if you put governance in where you push that down, you're not going to have it. People will not come up with the best ideas. They will not perform the best. So teams and people will challenge you, and you need to create that context. And I think that's quite important.
Yeah. And I think teams challenging, and this one indeed was one of those podcasts where we were challenging the authors. And I think it's not always bad to have a bit of a spirited debate. And we're not always 100% covering just what's in the book, because ultimately we want people to read the books. But we want to know people understand who the author is and the value they bring. And now I'm starting to sound like Marcus because I'm starting to ramble. So what should we do, Marcus? We should
go to the interview. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our podcast. Today we have Nick Leach with us. Hello, Nick. Hello, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Well, as usual, we start at the top. So please tell our listeners a bit who you are and why you wrote your book.
Okay, so I spent probably the last 20 years working in multinational organizations. And what I'm really passionate about is leadership. And one of the things I found as being a leader in one of those organizations is there's lots of books on why and lots of books on what, but not many on the how. And so what I wanted to do was create a book which helped, especially new leaders, learn how to create a purpose-led culture within an organization, because there's so much content out there, but there's not really anyone who's sort of provided new leaders, especially, with a way to go about developing a purpose and then actually putting it into place within an organization. And so that was kind of the premise for the book.
Wonderful. I think it's just as, people first, purpose is a big word at the moment, if not a new revitalized over the last year, where a lot of people reflected on what we're doing and why things are going the way they're going. So what is it for you then? What's your angle on purpose-driven? Is obviously a great idea, and I think there's a lot of evidence as well that purpose-driven organizations perform better. Why is it that we're still hanging on to this profit model so much, and what sort of is a step to do to get off that mindset?
The great question. I think part of the challenge is people are scared to, or organizations are scared, and they also don't know how. I think what we've lost over the last, I guess, probably decade is actually what true leadership actually is. We have lots of, especially from multinationals, when you look at their leadership programs, they're actually management essentials. They're not leadership essentials. They don't tell people or help people to become leaders. And I think that's the gap that's there. So you don't have people striving to achieve a better tomorrow for their customers. They're really just going around getting their quarterly numbers or whatever they need to do. And the gap I see in most organizations is a lot do have a purpose. So they have a purpose statement that's written on the wall. It's the first slide of a PowerPoint presentation, but there's no connection from purpose to strategy to execution. And it's making sure that there's that link from purpose to strategy, which is the enabler, which really transforms organizations, because it means people start to make decisions and focus on achieving what the ultimate goals of the organization really is. And I think, you look at most of the successful organizations over time have always been purpose-driven in the beginning. Especially, there's generally always a passionate leader at the beginning of any organization who's wanting to change the world in some way. And what's happened over time is, as the organizations get bigger, and you end up with far more layers of management, that gets lost. And then it becomes about policies, procedures, quarterly targets, and things that, most people lose the will to live over. And what we need to do is re-engage back with that real reason for why this organization exists and what their ambition is for their customer, and really help them to go out there and give them permission to be bold and go out there and really change the game. Because, I talk about a lot of workshops that I do. I sort of say to teams, we want to make your time in this organization worthwhile. We just don't want to have done the same shit everybody else has done. Sorry, I shouldn't. But we want to go out there and work out how we do it better and how we do it differently, but how we ultimately do it for the right reasons as well. So that's part of what the book is hopefully inspiring for people or leaders to go out there and do.
Okay, so I'm going to put on my kind of, let's take this exactly where a lot of people in my generation are going to go with this. Yep. As a certified boomer, as opposed to the majority of these millenniums that are out there, or Gen Zs that are coming up. I mean, there's a whole raft of these people that are coming up. And it's a lot of lip service, and it's a lot of kind of candy for them, that this is kind of what they want to do, and it's soft and it's fluffy. But at the end of the day, the stock market is driving these businesses. It is indeed the quarterly numbers. It is the old Milton Friedman that says the only purpose of a corporation within the rules is to return value to shareholders. And the other thing is, you talk about the fact that we're not training people to be managers, to be leaders. I've been around organizations. I've worked for Nokia. I've worked for big global organizations. The last thing they want is too many leaders. They want 3 or 4 leaders that set the organization in train, and then they want managers to make the machine run. So, that's what I say is the reality. So this whole idea of purpose-driven, yeah, it's nice and it's fluffy, but at the end of the day, it gets crushed by capitalism. And how do you respond to that?
And this is, we used to spend loads of time forecasting, right? The forecasting is the result, or the sales of the result is something else. Focus on the thing that delivers the sales. And this is where purpose really makes a difference. And it's not about being flowery and lofty. And there's a distinct process from how you say, how do we take what inspires us every day to get out of bed and come to work every morning? And how do we put that into day-to-day execution that really makes a difference? And then that will return far more quarterly margins than you've ever imagined. And, it's what you focus on. You can't, by looking at or focusing on the target, doesn't help you achieve it. You actually have to go and do something. So the key for me is making sure that you have teams set up to go out there and do that. Most organizations, and be keen on your experience as well, is most organizations put teams in rooms and say, off you go to it. They don't spend any time helping a team to actually put the qualities in place to become a team. So most of those teams end up being groups of individuals that come together to tell each other what they're doing, and they're working as individuals. And, if you go back to, Steve Jobs, I think, said that if all good or most powerful things came from groups of people working together, and that's part of the key. So I would say totally understand that you've got to make your quarterly targets, and that's businesses there to make a profit, but you make a profit doing something. Let's focus on what you're doing and doing that better than everybody else, and then you'll win. Quarterly targets.
I think that we're hearing this more and more, that truly purpose-driven companies are indeed more profitable. But at this point in time, the empirical evidence is really, really thin. So I hope there's some level of momentum that comes along. And also what we're seeing is big organizations, big companies that have the capital to be a bit kind of fluffy and focus on purpose, as opposed to small companies that are absolutely laser focused on, I've got to do this because I've got to make payroll. And they need that kind of room to breathe, to be able to think about, okay, if I take my eye off what I know works in making my machine go, and expand or shift to purpose driven instead of profit driven, it's going to take some time. So I hope we get there, but I think it's aspirational at this point.
I think there's you've sort of broken into say you either have to be purpose or profit driven as being opposites of each other. Whereas I think the way to achieve your profit is through purpose. So I don't sort of buy the idea that I have to get my quarterly target. I can't be purpose driven because I need to just make the money. Because it's the way that you can make the money will be far more successful if you're doing things or creating products that are aligned far more to your customers and the ambition you have for your organization. I think there's a real dilemma in, would you want to buy from a company whose sole focus was getting the next quarterly target, or would you want to buy from a company who's really trying their best to work out how to manage or deliver to you something that's far more exceptional? People will pay more. And this is where these organizations will generally make more profit, because you can actually charge more because people will pay for value if they know what they're getting. The minute you're in the generic business or commodity business, you've lost, right? If you're selling, you never sell the lettuce, you sell the salad. You've got to have that understanding of how you get out of that commodity business, because commodities are just a price-driven place of nowhereness. And that's
right.
what challenges a lot of organizations.
I'm going to come back with one more, and then I'm going to hand over to Marcus. Please tell that to Michael O'Leary at Ryanair, because Michael O'Leary is absolutely zero value, maximum profit, total commodity, and they're the biggest operating airline in all of Europe on that basis. And his premise is people will not pay for quality. They will only pay for getting from point A to point B the cheapest way they can, and that's what I'm delivering. So I think that we are indeed seeing some people will pay for the additional. I built this correctly. I was good environmentally. I'm responsible with my labor, and some people will pay more for that, but not everybody. But I will hand back over to Marcus, because I'm dominating this because I feel so passionately about having a good debate about these topics.
No, I love a debate. And can I just say one more thing before we hand over? Is I think there's the key is making that link from purpose to your strategy, so your strategy is driven by what you're trying to do. Because I also think that organization it's not about necessarily, people don't necessarily want cups of coffee, or they don't want all the stuff on the plane. It's a short plane ride, it's getting there. But to the same point is, if there was an airline who checked you in quicker, got you through the process faster, did things, they would beat you regardless of and if it was people would pay $5 or $10 maybe more to bypass the shenanigans you have with getting on and off planes. So it's deciding what you say the value is that people are going to be prepared to pay for, and answering that that I think you're sort of saying that people don't want the cups of coffee and everything else. Totally agree, but there's still ways you could improve that service being purpose driven, and deliver probably even better results.
I think that's a nice segue to what I want to ask. So I want to pick up on something you said earlier. I work a lot around projects that, to some extent, or often more as a wish list, have in customer centricity. And with customer centricity, we talk about this extra value, right? It might even sit before purpose, but basically, it's similar ambition to say, Ray, actually, as a business, we're not just focused on making profit for the business, but we're actually looking at who we're serving, why we're doing this, right? So customer centricity is often there, and I see a lot of projects struggling with that the gap between that statement and executing it, to have the balance between, well, we want to change from this profit-driven attitude to something more purpose-driven. But how do we define that, right? How do we redescribe essentially the target, so that when the leader has it all set up and narrative is there, which is great, and as you rightly say, great leaders have this purpose-driven narrative often. But how do you get from that narrative to the narrative or the target of a team? Because again, as you rightly said, if you just have a target, they tend to be often very narrow, often towards a profit line or some numbers, instead of actually purpose. And purpose is more than just numbers, right? There's way more there, which is the good thing about it. So how do you close a bit the gap between purpose and target? And you talked a bit about strategy. Can you elaborate on that, please?
Yeah, cool. I think the key is having the right purpose too. So the way I describe having the purpose statement, it should be two things. It should be the ambition you have for your customer, and that's also understanding what people really buy. So people don't buy drill bits; they buy holes. I came from the pharmaceuticals. People don't buy pills; they buy wellness, right? So if you understand what people are really buying as from you, and you understand the ambition you have for what you want to achieve for them, and you link that to what makes your organization unique or special, then you start to make sure that your purpose is really customer focused and the ambition you have for your customers. And then the key to making that link to strategy is how you set up and build teams. Because if you actually, and that was what I alluded to earlier, high-performing teams don't just happen, they need to be built. And part of building a team is actually understanding what is the purpose of this team, what are we here to do, and what's the big goal that we're trying to achieve. So once an organization has created that purpose, it's then empowering teams to sit down and say, okay, what's our day-to-day strategy looking like that we're doing right now, and how does this purpose influence what we do now? And how do we change or potentially change what we want to do to make that align better to where that purpose is. Because I think a lot of organizations without that, who are just profit driven, a lot of those teams have no ambition. They are just doing what they need to do, and they've probably been given their financial target to achieve for the year, and they're sitting there with that's the goal to do. And no one gets excited to go to work to do that every day. But if you're going out there to change the game, or deliver something which is you don't even know how you're going to do it yet, that's where the passion for life is. I mean, we spend so much time working. We should be making sure that people are jumping out of bed every day to go and do something valuable for society and for business and their customers.
I think that's really interesting. Just a quick one, Marcus.
Go on.
We deal with so many of these topics. We've had some really, really great authors and some really, really great books. And one of the things that keeps coming up is, as you just said, people want to be engaged. They want to make a difference. They want to do all of these things, and we need to lead them. And I say, yeah, not really. I know at least 70% of the people that simply want to come, they want to collect their paycheck, they want to go home, they want to spend time with their family, they want to go to the gym, and that's all they want to do. They don't want to be revved up. They just want to earn enough to make a decent living. So there is indeed this 20, 30% that want to be engaged. I'd love to find a way to bring the other 70% along, but most of them, they just want their paycheck. And I'm being debating in what I'm trying to say because I like the discussion.
Yeah, no, cool. I feel sad for those people. I don't know if that's a terrible thing to say, but I think being purpose-driven or inspiring people every day doesn't mean they have to come and work more hours or do anything. It's making sure that when they come to work, it's more exciting. Maybe in the absence of it, they're okay to go, you know what, I'm just happy to collect my paycheck and do what I do because I've got other interests outside of the work and everything else. But to the same point is, wow, imagine if you then also had excitement and things going on at work that was challenging you, but also providing you opportunities to grow, that you might go, you know what, I would really like to be involved in that. I can tell you some of the purpose-driven teams that I've worked on, once people have worked in one of those teams, they're on the journey to find it again. That because there's an energy or a magic something that's really innately exciting about working in a team that's really doing something different or exciting, that's changing the game. And people, once they've done that, they kind of want to find that again because it's exciting and it's better than just collecting the paycheck. In fact, I've got a diagram. It's in the book. The difference between a paycheck company and a purpose-driven company. And I think if you go down and see this difference at either side, I would challenge you to find if I've made any mistakes there, and then pick which one you want to work for. And I don't believe if you gave it to the 70% of people who you say are happy to collect a paycheck, I guarantee if you ask them which one they want to go with, they'd go with the purpose-driven one every day because
we should do that survey sometimes.
Because I think they're still pissed off with the same, I've got to get this friggin' target this month, and they've still got those things that are that drive them nuts. And I think I've seen people who go, I just want to collect a paycheck, and what most of them I've found is they're disengaged with their jobs because they've generally tried things in the past and they've failed to be able to get anything to go, and so now they've just given up and they're just collect the paycheck. It's the easiest thing to do, and then just carry on. I think a lot of them have just got disheartened with where things are at.
I think that's a really, really. I mean, I love that back and forth because it's really getting to a point. To an example, I want to bring in. So we did a job at a big telco, and it was exactly that. So we had people who really had change and transformation fatigue there. And so I was going in there actually with a bunch of your countrymen there, and all coming across from Australia. And when we first walked into the room, everyone was like, "Oh, another bunch of you consultants." It's like, "Oh, right,
oh my God,
okay, we're gonna play ball for a little bit, and in a couple of weeks we're gonna go back to what we did before." And we were like, "All right,
thank God.
as long as you give us a bit of time and a bit of attention, that's fine. And if it fails, it fails, but we'll try our best, right?" And then really about 8 weeks in, we had exactly that. So the penny dropped, the new ways of working. So we did some design thinking. We started to help them ask new questions to the customers and internal customers they were dealing with. And suddenly the penny dropped and the smiles came in, right? And you suddenly had people where you go, I have no idea if this works. They've been through stuff like that 3-4 times and never quite worked. So they're really disillusioned on this. Suddenly, they really enjoyed it. And they really enjoyed being closer to the customer, talking to them about features and things and they want to build, and really got engaged. And really, since then, being a few months later, they were on an internal radio show. And one of them just walked the radio show through the process they did and was really honest about the doubts they had in the beginning and what happened over the couple of months later. And it was brilliant. So it's really true. And I think it's really good to identify exactly that, to say, oh, look, some people just come for the paycheck. There is the likely reason for that is that because it isn't a great place with a purpose in the first place. And a lot of places don't have that. The second you have that, it's a different game. So it's just a symptom. And the second thing I wanted to say, because there's more and more evidence now there, not just from people, I think, and I quite believe in the potential of people. But so we just a few weeks back just had Jeff Schwartzman from Deloitte, and he was looking at human capital. They had just done a piece of research that came from the leadership level. So leadership at the same time, a bit to Troy's argument, is often actually unaware how much people actually want to change and engage. When they did research, they found that most leaders think that there's a larger number of people in the organization who don't want to come along for the journey. They don't want to change. They don't want to learn, and so on. So whereas the same people in the organization, when you ask them, are actually quite willing to do so. So there seems to be a gap between what
Yeah.
leadership often thinks is possible and what actually the people they actually have, which is just another thing. Yeah.
I think for leaders, it's a nice cop out to say, "Oh, people don't want to change, so we don't either." So it's the easiest thing for the leader to say is, "Oh, they don't want to change, so I can't really do it, and so it's too hard. Leave it alone." I think the interesting thing that I hear from that example that you gave is that the key to, I believe, what you did is you didn't go in there and tell them what to do. You went in there and helped them find the way for themselves. And it's when they find the way for themselves, they find the enlightenment from from that journey and talking with customers and doing it. You didn't come in and consult and tell them what here's the answer. You came in and said, let's find the answer together, and facilitated it out of them, which is exactly what I do with teams as well. Is you have to facilitate. They have to, for them to own it, they have to be involved in it. You can't sort of give it to them and say, here, go do it. They have to sort of have that buy-in and involvement in it. So totally agree.
So somewhere in the book you say your teams will test you. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, I think the key is people don't. It doesn't matter what you do, what you say. It matters what you do, right? So your actions speak louder than your words. So and to the point made earlier, if you've got there'll be, when you launch, and this was around the context of launching a purpose to an organization, as I said, the first thing most of the people in the organization are going to do is going to go, okay, well, this is all very nice. Now tell me what it means. So how does it mean to what I do? And the first thing they do is test you on decision making, right? So they need to understand that you are going to make decisions based on that purpose from now on. So they're going to test or want to see your resolve to do that. If you can't be a purpose-driven culture if it's optional whether you make decisions based on it. If you're now creating a purpose-driven culture, that is now the way you just make decisions, and that's it. Decisions are now made that way from this point in time on, and that's the test that the people are going to wait for to make sure that what you say and what you do are the same thing. Because it's different from what's come before. And they also, at that point of launching something like a new purpose, and this is the way we want to go forward, people don't know how right then and there. So they're they go, okay, I get it. So there'll be some part of the group, but maybe that 30% are going to go, Jesus, I love this. I can't wait. I'm on board. Where do we go? Where do we go next? And then there's the group is going to go, okay, yeah. So the next time quarterly targets comes up, what's going to happen then? It's just going to go back to the same old. And so the test is, decisions need to be made around that purpose, and that's going to be tested by your teams. And if you don't do it well, what you ultimately do is your teams will not trust the leadership because you decide when you want to use the purpose, and then it becomes generally a weapon of mass destruction instead of something that really helps the organization to move forward.
Yeah.
So it is
And
really important, and that's why part of the job of a leader is to have some courage around that. They have conviction around what they believe is right, and where that maybe in the short term there may be a decision which looks in hindsight to be to be counter to what's happened before. You've got to have that courage to go, no, there's got to be a better way. And part of the other challenge that I've had to face myself is that if we want to stay true to our purpose, we have to find a different way than the way that everybody else does this, because it doesn't work for us anymore. And challenging the organization and your teams to do that, they'll come back with the answer. And they'll be excited and energized by the fact that you go, we won't accept doing it the old way because the old way sucked. And we've got to find a better way. Actually enlightens and empowers people to go, shit, okay, let's go away and work out how we do that. And they'll definitely come up with something that'll be far more innovative, exciting, and far better solution. And I've done it before, and we've changed the game with products that were not as good as weren't the best in the market, and we beat everybody in the market because we looked at the market differently and we challenged ourselves to find better ways to do things. It is totally the key.
So you hit on one word in there, and I'm not going to make a question out of it, but I want to bring it up because it's important. It's super important, and that's the word trust. So
Trust
the
is powerful.
organization and the teams have to trust leadership. The leadership have to equally trust the teams. And if you don't have that trust, it's really, really much harder to do the kind of things that you're talking about doing. As we're wrapping up, there's always, as Marcus likes to say, there's always more questions than there is time. But engaging teams, engaging shareholders, engaging customers these days, and really always, is about emotions. And we have
Yep.
seen emotions kind of really, really go to the extremes in the last 5 years. I mean, Bitcoin went from a really interesting little programmatic idea
Yeah.
to a cult following to an out and out religion that's totally emotionally driven. Because if you look at Bitcoin with a critical mind, and I'm a blockchain enterprise architect myself, there's no value in Bitcoin at all. And there was no value in leaving the European Union with Brexit. And yet people were energized by this level of emotion. Can you talk about emotion when it comes to your work around purpose and organizations?
So emotion, I believe, is critically important, and I think logic is challenging for most organizations because logic means that you just do the next iterative bit of everything because you already know the outcome. It's always predetermined rather than thinking, what if it could be something different? I think the Brexit and Donald Trump and all these things are a vehicle of which is a whole other podcast around the disenfranchisement of society and the fact that the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer and the middle are getting squeezed one way or the other. The society or the capitalism that's been running right now probably doesn't necessarily is a reflection of the emotion that's now created. And I think people, and certainly Donald Trump, really drove the way he talked and the way that he spoke really drove that sort of empowered that emotion as well. And so did the guys with Brexit. I mean, the guys that were running around with buses with them, get all this money back for the NHS and things like that, which, was considered to be factually wrong. Those things just revolt against the establishment, which I think is irrelevant. In organizations, emotion can be used really powerfully when it's positive. And when you have an ambition for your customer, which is always positive, then that emotion can be put to use in a far more productive and a far more spiritual way for people. Because negative emotions still not nice emotion for anybody. So it's far nicer for us to be in a positive frame of emotion. And I can't remember who said it, but logic leads to conclusions, emotion leads to action, and that's where I think in business emotion is really important, and inspiration and those things are really the pieces that will drive the organization forward. It won't be logic and more meetings and more policies and procedures.
Yeah, and I think that's a great notion to sort of end up on here. So, and I'll say, Nick, thank you so much for a great conversation and your insights and for spending some time with us today. Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you guys. It's been and thanks for the challenge. It's been a good discussion.
You've been listening to The Wicked Podcast with co-host Marcus Kirsch and me, Troy Norcross.
Please subscribe on Podomatic, iTunes, or Spotify. You can find all relevant links in the show notes. Please tell us your thoughts in the comment section and let us know about any books for future episodes.
You can also get in touch with us directly on Twitter on @WickedandBeyond or @Troy_Norcross. Also, learn more about the Wicked Company book and the Wicked Company project at wickedcompany.com.